And the reason we're baking is because we've got the Great Beacon Bake Off coming up on the 15th of June. And it's basically a way of saying thank you to NHS staff at Wexham Hospital. So on the 15th of June, I'm going to pick up hopefully lots of delicious bakes from everybody and take them to Wexham. Those who have entered the competition will have their cakes judged by paramedics. It's a bit of fun. And then the paramedics at Wexham will take cakes, other cakes to the hospital, to doctors, nurses, cleaners at the hospital. You really don't have to enter the competition if it's not something you want to do, but if you'd like to just bake a cake to the donate, or some biscuits or some scones, you do not have to enter the competition to take part, because obviously this is mostly to say thank you to the NHS. Right, so lemon drizzle, massive favourite for a lot of people. When I had my catering business, this was one of the favourite cakes that was almost always asked for, especially when we did afternoon teas and things like that. This recipe makes a big cake, so this is a 31 centimetre springform tin. You can get away with a slightly smaller tin, that is fine. You may need to bake it for slightly longer. You can halve this recipe if you'd like to make a loaf out of it, or you could make individual cupcakes out of it. So there's a selection of things you can do, and I have weighed out all my ingredients. They're all here, and I'm going to talk you through the method. So firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to cream together the sugar and the butter. Now, the creaming method basically just means that you are going to whisk together the sugar and the butter until the butter is really incorporated into the sugar. It becomes light and airy, and basically the sugar is pretty much dissolved. And that in turn captures a lot of air in the butter and helps with the rise. So it's a very important process. You don't want to rush this part, because it will ultimately mean you end up with a really good cake if you get this process right. So we're just going to do that part first. Using a spatula, I'm just going to scrape the sides and make sure that my butter mixture is now well creamed. Can you see? So it's very light, it's all been well incorporated. I'm going to mix that a little bit further just to make sure it's absolutely well creamed, and then go on to the next process. Right, so next we're going to be adding in the eggs. We're going to do this one at a time. Remember how we crack eggs? We're going to make sure that we crack them into a bowl first, because otherwise you might be cracking some shell into your mix. So we're going to do one, okay, and then I'm going to add this in. Okay. Now you may find when you get to the last egg, the second last egg, your mix starts looking a bit like scrambled eggs. If this happens, do not panic. Okay, it just means the mixture has split slightly, but when you add the flour, it will come right and sort itself out. Okay, so does have quite a few eggs. As I said, it is a big cake. Okay. Now remember, the size of the eggs is important. So this is large. These are large eggs going in. If you were going to add smaller eggs, you would have to add another egg. So the consistency of the mixture before it goes into the tin is very important, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so just pop that there for now. When you add your flour, you don't want to overmix the mixture, because it can mean that it becomes a bit heavy and when the gluten's been overworked. So I'm using the folding in method, and all I'm doing is a figure of 8, and I'm turning the egg mixture over itself, okay? Now at this point, obviously it starts to thicken because I'm adding the flour, and same with a good sponge, is that you do not want the mixture to be too dry. Now, when you've been making cakes for a long time, you learn to get a feel for it, because it is it's a consistency and a of the mixture that you want to be correct. So I've just added a couple of tablespoons of milk. You want it to be dropping consistency when it goes into your cake mold. Flour has different absorption rates as well, depending on when it's been harvested and all that sort of thing. So it is one, the more you make cakes, the more you'll get to understand what the consistency needs to be. So for me, I'm going to add another couple of tablespoons to that. Tablespoons. Now, to get the lovely lemon flavour, I'm going to zest 4 lemons, and using my zester, most of you have used a zester at the Beacon now, so I'll do that shortly. Okay, put a little bit more milk. So 5 tablespoons have gone into there. Okay. Now this is self-raising flour I'm putting in, which obviously has baking powder in it. If you cannot find self-raising flour, I've really struggled at some points trying to get self-raising flour. It's really easy to make your own, and you simply add 1 teaspoon of baking powder to every 110 grams of plain flour. Right, so very quickly, when you're making this at home, I would get everything zested up before you make the cake and start mixing everything up. I've just left it because I wanted to show you. So it's really important that you're obviously very careful when you zest, because this is very sharp, the blade. And I'm giving it a couple of short, sharp scrapes on each side so that I'm removing the zest. So the yellow part is the zest, it's what you want. Underneath the zest is the pith. And the pith is the white part, which is underneath, and that is actually quite bitter. So you don't want to be adding too much of that, because it can make it quite bitter. So I'm moving it round as I'm doing it, giving it a couple of shakes, up and down on the grater. Okay, so this lovely zest, this really fragrant, it's going to give a lovely freshness to your cake. It's going to go into my cake mixture, and I'm going to mix that in. Remember not to overmix the cake mixture. Okay, it's the poor postman getting a bark. And the orange juice, the lemon juice from zest, from the lemons, I'm going to squeeze, and I'm going to pop them into my sugar for my sugar syrup. So I've just weighed sugar into a pan. I'm going to pour my lemon juice into the pan, and I'm going to stir it over the heat, making sure that all the sugar dissolves before it boils, and that will be my, my syrup that I'm going to drizzle over the top of my cake. Right, so my lemons are zested. I'm going to pop the zest into my mix and give that a really good mix up. Okay, so that it is nicely incorporated into this. I've got some lovely citrusy flavour going all the way through that cake. Okay, and I've got my cake tin that I just told you about. So I'm going to loosen it by releasing this clip. A lot of you have already done this with me before, but basically you're just going to take a piece of greaseproof. You can then put the tin on the top, just draw around it like that roughly, and then use a pair of scissors just to cut it out. When you cut it out, remember that you want to leave a little bit of a lip around the circle so that you can clip it in. So if you look at my circle there, I'm simply going to, in fact you can fold it in half and in quarters to make it easier for yourself. And then where the line is of the circle, I'm just going to leave at least a 2 centimetre, doesn't have to be pretty because you're not going to be using that. But you can see my circle and then I've got a lip around it like that. So I'm going to pop my tin down, clip the base on and make sure that it is firmly in there. So it's just coming out the side slightly, which is why we needed the lip. And that's ready to go. So I'm going to spoon my mixture into the cake tin, like that. Now, I was going to say to you, when you've used up your butter, the outside of the butter is quite good, the paper, to wipe your tin with to line it, to give it a coating of butter if you are to help stop your cake from sticking. This cake does have a lot of butter in it, so that's not normally a problem. But there we go. So I'm just going to smooth it out. You can see now, I'm just going to smooth the cake out in the centre so that it's evenly spread. Okay, now the thing about this cake is once you've put it in the oven, you do not want to be opening the oven door to check it, because it'll cause the cake to sink in the middle, and once it sinks, it won't rise in the centre. So this is a big cake, as I said. We're going to put it in an oven of 180 degrees fan oven, and I'm going to leave that in there for 50 minutes. Okay, so middle shelf, make sure it's all even on the top. There we go. I'm going to pop that in, and then we'll have a look at it in a minute. To cut my lemons in half, remember to hold them securely to make sure that they are not going to slip around as you cut them. And then I'm going to hold my juicer and twist to squeeze out all that juice. And remember to squeeze your lemon at the end to make sure you get out any excess. You really want to get as much out of that lemon juice in as you want to give it a really nice lemony, intense flavour. So absolutely, when you're making this cake, have everything ready to go. Have your lemons zested. I normally add the lemon zest once I've creamed the butter before I add the flour, just so that it gets a chance to really incorporate into the mix. Okay, and then again I'm going to pop this on the hob, make sure the handle's to the side, stir it with a spoon until it has dissolved over a low heat. When your cake is ready, you take it out of the oven, obviously using oven gloves, allow it to cool for 5 minutes, and then all we do is pierce it with a fork on the top lightly. I shall show you when it comes out. Make sure that your syrup is warm, so you might need to warm it up, and then you drizzle it all over the top, and that absorbs into the cake. Piercing the cake with a fork on the top just helps the syrup to go all the way through the cake. Okay, so there we go, pouring that in there, and I'm going to heat it up. I'll get back to you in a minute. So our cake is out the oven, you can see I've let it cool for just about 3 to 4 minutes. You still want it to be warm. I'm now going to just pierce it lightly all over the top with a fork, and that's to enable the syrup to sink all the way down through the cake. My lovely lemon syrup, which I've just heated up again, just so that it's warm, because it absorbs better then. I'm just going to drizzle that, so start at the top and work your way around. Okay, and you want to really incorporate that so it's nice and syrupy. You've got to leave it to set for a little bit, so you've just got to wait, you want to wait for it to all sink in beautifully into the cake. And it really does give it a lovely texture, really delicious citrusy flavour. Yeah, in order for my cake not to stick to the plate as I turn it out, we sprinkle a little bit of sugar on the top. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of spoon to do this, obviously. And that means that when I turn out my cake, it's not going to stick to the cake, but it also to the plate, but it also gives it a lovely little crunch on the top. So I've done that. I'm now just going to use my spatula to loosen the sides like that. Okay, I'm going to unclip my mould like that. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to turn my cake onto the plate. You probably will need an adult to do this for you because it's a little bit tricky and you don't want to end up with a broken cake. So I'm gently going to place the plate on top. With my other fingers, I'm grabbing the bottom and tipping it up like this. And then there we go. Now, obviously, if you're going to make little cupcakes, so you can use little muffin, oh, there we go. So that you definitely need a hand with. But there we go. But if you're going to make little individual lemon drizzle cakes, which you could do just using the muffin cases, you just pierce the top, drizzle a couple of teaspoons of your syrup over the top, and sprinkle a little bit of caster sugar on the top just to give it a little bit of a crunch. But there we go, that's our cake. Lemon drizzle cake. You can make lemon zest, so you can cook off some zested lemon using the different type of zester to sprinkle on the top. You just blanch that in water and sugar stock. But anyway, there you go. Have a go.